Hello, lovers of horror stories. Today, I come with a tale that has kept me glued to my chair for days. A story that isn't new, but has something special. That mix of morbid curiosity and pure terror that makes you wonder if you really want to know what's on the other side. But before we dive into this story, I want to remind you of something. If you like cosmic horror stories, the kind that leave you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, the kind that make you question the reality around you, then this channel is your place. Subscribe, hit the bell, and don't miss any of the stories I have prepared. Get comfortable, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Because after this story, every window in your house will seem suspicious. Enjoy it. The building was old, probably over 100 years old. Solid brick walls, 3-meter-high ceilings, parquet floors even in the common hallways. The kind of construction where you breathe spaciousness, where space doesn't feel like a luxury, but like something natural. Of course, it had its flaws too. Old pipes that groaned at night, mosquitoes impossible to eradicate in the basements. But nothing too serious for someone looking for a place to live. There was, however, one problem I hadn't anticipated. The layout was absurd. My door opened at the end of an independent hallway, the only access on that entire stretch. I didn't know my neighbors. I hadn't even seen them. I suppose that oddity was due to the building having been expanded in phases and my apartment had come later. Or perhaps, at some point, it had its own separate entrance. The point is, the interior layout confused me. After a few turns, I no longer knew where I was. Only the mental map I'd made of the place allowed me to know that I didn't live on a corner. The flat was rented. Before me, a retired couple had lived there, but their children took them to live with them, and the flat became available. Since I came through acquaintances, the process was simple. I agreed to make some repairs and get rid of the old furniture. With that last part, there were no issues. No one was going to defend those Soviet-era wardrobes and sideboards. Most were chipped, with crooked doors and a smell of mothballs that had settled into their fibers like another tenant. I threw them out without remorse. That's when I found the window. It was a sunny day, scattered clouds, warm light. One of those mornings that invite you to be outside, but I was inside, fighting a battle against an enormous wardrobe. Its back was fixed to the wall with a dozen oak planks screwed into the wall. The wardrobe, literally, hung from them. Dismantling it became a nightmare. I'd sweated buckets. My t-shirt stuck to my back. My hands burned from splinters and the friction of rusted screws. Every time I managed to loosen one, another seemed to tighten on its own. It was as if the wardrobe didn't want to be taken apart, as if it knew that behind it there was something that shouldn't be seen. When I finally managed to tear off the last plank, sweaty and cursing, I found something I didn't expect. A window. Aged frames, shutters grayed by time, dirty panes, and a dim light filtering through from the other side. I stood staring at it, not understanding. On the farthest wall of the apartment, where there should have been nothing but brick and mortar, there was a window. It wasn't a modern window. Not one of those double-glazed ones they install nowadays. It was old, with wooden frames painted a white that time had turned yellowish. The hinges were rusted, and the handle was brass, worn from use. It looked like it came from another century. I approached cautiously, as if it might be plotting something. I touched the frame. The wood was cold and slightly damp, as if it had just been cleaned. I opened it. The outside led to a small inner courtyard, or rather, a well. I didn't see any entrance, any exit. I didn't see any other windows either. It seemed someone had opened it in the wall just to please the former tenants. The courtyard was tiny, 4 whitewashed brick walls covered with moss in the joints. The floor was packed earth with some loose stones. There were no pots, no furniture, nothing to indicate that anyone used it. It was a dead space, a forgotten gap in the heart of the building. I shrugged, closed it, and went back to the battle against the furniture. But the window left me uneasy. My plan was to place a piece of furniture in that spot, but that hole in the wall changed everything. I even thought about bricking it up. Then I decided that actually I could put my desk in front of it. The courtyard wasn't big, and from what I could see, the sun barely reached it, except perhaps in midsummer at noon. Besides, an eave protected the window from rain. The interior walls were painted a light orange, a pleasant color which had resisted time and humidity well. I suppose the lack of direct sun had preserved the paint. A month passed. I finished the repairs, furnished the house to my liking. I slept, ate, lived without paying attention to what was on the other side of those old shutters. The first time I noticed something strange was on a stormy day. It was raining hard. The water beat against the glass as if it wanted to get in. I had just arrived home, soaked to the bone and in a bad mood. The day, which had started clear, had turned into a downpour in just 2 hours. To make matters worse, no taxi would pick me up. The city was paralyzed. I dried off, showered, and sat down to read. I didn't feel like working or watching a movie. A book was just what I needed to disconnect. I settled at my desk next to the hidden window. The light from outside was excellent for reading. I don't know how long passed. Half an hour, maybe an hour. When I looked up, I froze. The inner courtyard was full of sunlight. I jumped up and ran to the other windows. Outside, the storm continued. Puddles, gray skies, rain falling relentlessly. There, in that small brick well, the sun was shining. It wasn't a dim light. It wasn't a reflection. It was midday sun, intense, warm, like in the middle of summer. And through the window came a golden glow that lit up the entire room. My mind refused to process it. I approached the window with my heart pounding. I touched the glass. It was hot, warm, as if it had been receiving direct sunlight for hours. I opened the window. The air that came in wasn't the cold, damp air of the storm. It was dry, warm air with a slight smell of earth and pollen. It smelled like spring. I slammed the window shut. I backed away from it as if it could attack me. I went to the kitchen. Coffee, cognac. First the coffee, then the cognac. A lot of cognac. I smoked a cigarette, even though I almost never smoke. From the kitchen, the sound of rain was unmistakable. It couldn't be an illusion. There's no way, I kept telling myself, that it rains everywhere, and there it's sunny. A natural anomaly, perhaps. An atmospheric rarity. I didn't believe it, even as I thought it. I decided to use technology. Technology doesn't lie, I thought. The phone camera doesn't lie. I went back to the room with the phone in my hand. The window was still there, radiant, as if mocking me. I focused and shot. For a moment, the screen went dark. My heart stopped. I expected to see a brick wall. I expected the phone to show me reality and confirm I was crazy. But the photo came out perfect. The window, the sun, the courtyard. Damn it. I didn't know what to do. Tell someone? I had trusted friends, but what if it was dangerous? What if putting them at risk was a mistake? For a week, I turned the matter over. Finally, I decided to explore on my own. First, investigate. Then, decide. I bought climbing gear, ropes, carabiners, harnesses, what was necessary for a descent. The following Saturday, after a light breakfast, I faced the window. I opened the shutters, secured the ropes at several anchor points. If one failed, the others would hold me. I leaned out to my waist. Smooth walls, the eave that protected the window, and, higher up, the edge of the roof. The ground was about 4 meters below, 4 meters. I live on the second floor, I thought. How hadn't I realized that before? I took a deep breath, pulled the rope. It held. I went out through the window and let my legs hang. The cold outside ran down my back. Adrenaline tingled in my fingers. I began to descend. I hung 2 meters above the ground, holding onto the eave. I cursed silently. I jumped. The impact shook my legs and I fell sideways. I got up, checked that nothing was broken, and looked around. Nothing special. Packed earth, walls, and the window I'd come out of. I looked up. The sky was a deep blue, clean, without a cloud. Was it always like this here? I wanted to shout, fill my lungs and let out a cry of triumph or fear, I didn't know which. But something stopped me. Who knows what might be here? Better not draw attention. The silence was absolute. No cars, no birds, no voices. only the beating of my heart and the rustle of my clothes as I moved. It was a dense silence, as if the air itself was waiting for something. I walked to the center of the courtyard. The ground was firm but slightly soft, as if it had rained recently. There were no footprints. No one had been there in a long time. I touched the wall. It was cold, but not damp. The bricks were clean, without mold. That courtyard, despite being exposed to the elements, didn't seem to have suffered the ravages of time. I looked up at the sky again. The blue was deep, intense, almost unreal. Too perfect, like a painted backdrop. The expedition was over. I climbed back up. Blood pounded in my temples. My heart was racing, and it wasn't from the effort. Climbing 4 meters shouldn't be that exhausting. I was terrified. I had crossed into another world, or was it the same world, but distorted? My head was a seething mass of unanswered questions. I managed to calm down. I laughed to myself like an idiot and sat down at the desk. I already had a plan. Operation Cover had begun in my mind. A month passed, enough time to prepare the next phase. I bought materials and built a kind of balcony that jutted out 2 meters from the window. I replaced the old structure with a double-glazed window, just in case something from the other side slipped through. Under the eave, I installed a roll-down shutter. I also studied how to reach the roof. The solution was obvious: a ladder. But putting a 5-meter ladder on a 2-meter-wide balcony wasn't a good idea, so I bought 20 steel staples and hammered them into the wall, creating an improvised climbing ladder. The process was slow and dangerous. Several times I nearly fell. On one occasion, a staple came loose and I fell from the height of the 3rd floor. Only the fact that my leg got tangled in a rope hanging from the balcony saved me from dying. I ended up hanging upside down with a couple of broken boards. But finally, the ladder was ready, an irregular row of staples climbing to the edge of the roof. When I hammered in the last one, I held my breath and didn't look down. That day was supposed to be my triumph, not the moment to peer into the void. And then came the day of truth. I packed my backpack with food for a day: a mat, water, flashlights, ropes, and most importantly, the camera. I'd borrowed it from a friend. It came with a telephoto lens, a macro, and a wide angle, and, of course, a compass. It didn't occur to me to bring a tripod, but my gear was already heavy enough. I climbed the staples. The roof sheeting creaked under my feet. I strained not to look at the void. When my hands touched the edge, I closed my eyes. A moment, just a moment, and I opened them. I didn't know what to expect. A paradise garden, a desert, an endless steppe, or maybe mist and rocks emerging from it. What I saw disappointed me a little, to be honest. Large blocks of stone, like icebergs of rock, frozen in waves of mist. Sometimes the mist rose up to 40 meters in swirls and rings. The roof was immense, much larger than it seemed from below. It stretched in all directions like a gray, undulating platform, dotted with small cracks and patches of dry moss. I headed to the edge of the roof, counting my steps. 8, 30, 100. I stopped. I'd walked 100 steps, but visually I'd barely moved 20 or 30 meters, spatial anomalies. A chill ran down my spine. If space behaved like this, what happened to time? What if while I was walking, days had passed at home? What if I was late for work? The absurdity of the idea didn't stop panic from washing over me. I ran back to the edge. 3 steps, 5, 8. I nearly fell headfirst into the inner courtyard. What the hell? I looked back. 20 meters out, 100 steps, 8 back. Very convenient for fleeing. I ran down. I went inside and threw myself at the computer. Date and time. Same day, only 20 minutes later. Relief made me sit down in the chair. Time was fine. I went back up. This time I was more prepared. Anxiety had turned into curiosity. On the roof, I took out the compass. The needle spun half a turn and stopped, pointing in a fixed direction. North, I assumed. I looked up to orient myself by the sun. There was no sun. I looked around. There were no shadows. None. As if it were a cloudy day, but with vivid colors and contrasts. That did disturb me. Light without a source. There were no clouds that could diffuse sunlight. There was no object reflecting artificial light. And yet, everything was illuminated with perfect clarity, without shadows, without gradients. It was like being inside a photo studio, with invisible spotlights placed at every possible angle. I started walking toward the edge of the roof without taking my eyes off the compass. The needle remained fixed. This time the edge was 70 steps away. I peered over. The building looked dilapidated, empty windows like skull sockets looking out over a mist-covered landscape. The mist moved like an ocean, crashing against the walls in rhythmic waves. I thought I saw something moving below, but no matter how much I looked, I couldn't make out anything. Something, however, caught my attention. The building from above didn't look the same. The proportions were altered. The windows that from outside looked normal, from the roof appeared elongated, as if someone had stretched them upward. And the colors of the bricks were different, darker, almost black in some places. I walked along the perimeter of the roof. The sheeting sank under my feet. I took some photos with the wide angle, then switched to the telephoto and shot at one of the distant rocks. I didn't find any way down, but I noticed something. The mist had risen. Now it reached the second-floor windows. Before, it barely reached the top of the first-floor ones. The sky was beginning to darken. The blue turned crimson, like a sunset. And this time, there were shadows. The rocks cast enormous silhouettes, all pointing toward my building, like a titanic fist closing around me. I ran back, 2 steps, 10, 100. The courtyard didn't appear. I kept running. 20 minutes later, with my heart about to burst, I nearly fell off the roof. I looked back. In the twilight, the mist was beginning to dance at roof level. I scrambled down, slipping on the staples. I went inside and closed the window. I pulled down the shutter with a metallic clang. Total darkness. I turned on the flashlight and then the room light. I looked at the shutter, only the reflection of the lamp. Too exhausted to undress, I fell onto the bed and slept without dreaming. The next day, logic tried to assert itself. Idiot, I thought. It's a building in the middle of a valley. Mist rises at night, it's normal. The sun doesn't reach the courtyard because it's boxed in. But the photos didn't lie. I downloaded the images to the computer. They were overexposed, burned out, every single one. Digital photos don't burn out like that, not without radiation. The thought chilled my blood. What if that place was radioactive? What if I'd contaminated myself? I spent a sleepless night waiting to see my hair fall out or my skin melt. I bought a Geiger counter. No radiation. Not even background radiation. Absolute zero. I spent weeks experimenting. I discovered that distance in that world depended on desire. The more you wanted to reach somewhere, the farther it became. My escape from the roof had worked because my only goal was survival, not the courtyard. Sometimes, if I emptied my mind, I crossed the roof in 3 steps. The compass didn't point north. It pointed to the window. My window. I did other tests. I dropped an object from the roof. It fell downward, but never reached the ground. It disappeared into the mist before touching the ground. I didn't hear any impact sound. I threw a stone. Same thing. It disappeared without a sound. I left a rope hanging. When I pulled it back, the end was cut, as if someone had bitten it with sharp teeth. I never left anything unattended again, and the mist rose 2 meters every night, sometimes more, sometimes up to 4. I built a 5-meter observation tower. 3 months of hellish work, but I completed it. A pulley at the top made transporting materials easier. Fear paralyzed me for 4 days before my first night there. Finally, I mustered my courage. Thick clothes, food, 2 thermoses of hot tea, electric flashlights, kerosene lamps, and 3 chemical lanterns. I climbed the tower at dusk. From above, I saw the landscape better. The building was in the center of a huge depression, a circular valley. The mist wasn't rising, it was overflowing from outside, filling the valley like water in a bathtub. For hours, I only watched its slow dance. Then, the mist passed over the edge of the roof. Thousands of ghost serpents climbed the walls. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. The sky turned crimson black and absolute darkness fell. I lit a kerosene lamp. The warm light pushed away the feeling of claustrophobia. I tied a flashlight to a rope and lowered it into the mist. I thought I saw an enormous hand, 3 meters across, made of vapor trying to catch it. I never lowered another light. A week later, I invited 2 friends. Marcus and Leo. Marcus hesitated at first. "This shit scares me," he said, but Leo convinced him. "If there's danger, we stop. Promise." The first visit left them speechless. Marcus, who had thought it was a joke, was lost for words in front of the ocean of mist. And then Marcus noticed something. The rocks, the few that were visible, were arranged in a spiral, like petals of a giant flower. We were at the center. They started spending more time at my place. We discussed theories, made plans. They slept there more than at their own homes. Perhaps that's why I didn't notice the changes at first. The apartment began to behave strangely. Things weren't where they should be. The teacup seemed to be within reach, but when I stretched, it was 3 handspans away. I also noticed that the clocks didn't show the same time. The living room one ran 5 minutes slower than the kitchen one, and the one in my room 10 minutes faster. The lights flickered for no reason. The radio turned on by itself, always on the same frequency, a static that seemed to have a rhythm, as if someone were breathing on the other side. I attributed it to exhaustion. Leo, meanwhile, was inspecting the old shutters. Under layers of paint and grime, he found inscriptions, strange symbols similar to Hindi, but with differences. We tried to translate them. It was a failure. When reproducing the sounds, we got growls, guttural hisses, and inhuman language. "Lovecraft," said Marcus. We investigated. They were protective symbols, to keep evil spirits away. We laughed, but just in case, we copied them onto the window frame with indelible marker. That night, when I closed the window, a dry thud shook the shutter. We jumped. Then came the curses of a neighbor who had dropped something on the floor. We laughed. The tension broke, but that night, we all had nightmares. Curiosity won over fear. Marcus noticed that the overexposed photos still had information. Some areas had different gradients. He believed something could be recovered. Leo proposed leaving a camera recording all night, and also a live rat. We argued. I lost the argument. We weren't going to test on humans, were we? That evening, at dusk, we placed the cage with the rat on the roof. Food, water, a blanket. Marcus climbed the tower and installed 2 cameras, one digital and one film. He connected them to a backup battery. We came down, closed the window. The digital photos revealed something horrible. The landscape in the darkness was apocalyptic. The mist filled with tall, thin figures with multiple limbs, asymmetrical. Just looking at them was frightening. The sky was an ocean of blood, and the world rested on 7 columns of pure darkness. And then someone scratched the shutter. We froze. A tiny sound, like tiny nails. The rat. It had escaped and wanted to come back. Leo wanted to open it. We stopped him. It was night. The mist was there. A whimper, a high-pitched squeal. Then, silence. We didn't sleep well. The next day, we dragged ourselves through until the afternoon. Headaches, aching bodies. We decided it was the end. We were going to recover the equipment, and if the rat had survived, that too. Then, we would report the discovery, and forget everything. But when we opened the shutter, the courtyard had changed. Part of the paint had fallen off, revealing walls covered in dark red symbols, the same ones we'd drawn on the frame, but thousands of them. And on the ground, a black viscous stain. We climbed up. Leo passed me the cameras while I caught them. The battery was too heavy. We left it. While Leo was coming down, he stopped and stared at something. I followed his gaze. The mist had arrived. White filaments crept over the edge of the roof, sliding toward us. "Get down!" I shouted. Leo moved fast, but when he reached the ground, the courtyard stretched. I saw him running toward the window, but each stride took him farther away. He climbed onto the pulley, pulled the crank. The rope snapped. He fell to the ground, got up, ran. The mist caught him. Only for a second, but it caught him. I saw him emerge from the mist with his skin covered in black blisters that burst on contact with the air. He was screaming. I don't know how, but he climbed. I grabbed him and pulled him inside. We closed the window. Leo lay on the floor, babbling nonsense. His skin was blackening, cracking. His eyes were sinking in. I went to call an ambulance, and then, from the floor, Leo stood up. "Negadul," he said, in a voice that wasn't human. He moved toward me. His head hung, his jaw dislocated. A green liquid dripped. I grabbed the butcher's axe hanging in the kitchen, and I drove it between his eyes. His body collapsed, a couple of spasms, then silence. I spent almost a month in a rehabilitation center. Marcus was found dead in his photography lab. He had the photos in his hand, but he'd burned the negatives. His face was a mask of terror. I don't know what he saw. I don't want to know. I tried to tell the truth at the police station. They showed me the recordings from the cameras, which showed the infernal landscape and the figures in the mist. They sent me to a psychiatrist. To get out, I had to confess. I said I'd killed Leo. It wasn't true, not entirely, but it was a lie they could understand. When the agents arrived at my house, the body had almost completely decomposed, but the window was still there, the walls covered in symbols. Someone, somewhere, was interested. Plainclothes people, without identification. I told them everything. They pretended to believe me. I pretended to believe them. A month later, the building exploded. Gas leak, they said. The next day, I walked among the rubble. Only a couple of load-bearing walls remained of the building, and a window, slightly twisted but intact. Through its panes, only sky was visible. But if you stood at the right angle, you could see a fragment of brick covered in dark red symbols. I wonder if, one day, the rain and wind will erase the marker marks, and if someone, upon opening that old window, will see something else.